Hi, welcome to the Ethics of Travel Photography. I'm Siobhan Mulligan. I run a company called The Giving Lens. At The Giving Lens, we take teams of photographers on international workshops around the world, not only to explore photography, but to partner with a local nonprofit. We document the issues at hand, we teach photography to various communities, and overall we provide media and a large donation to the nonprofit in country. Because of this, I have a lot of experience working with nonprofits and documenting difficult situations when you're on the road, not to mention just the general rules of travel photography that some people don't know. With the amount of people that have cameras today, in the world feeling smaller than ever, with flights and volunteer opportunities happening every single day, it's more important than ever before that we talk about what it means to lift up your camera when you're on a trip and be taking pictures in a different culture, country, and language. With that, let's jump in and explore the ethics of travel photography. There's a lot of reasons we hit the road, but it is important to figure out our motivations for traveling before we even pick up the camera. Number one is almost always going to be to see the world. This is what most of us want. We have this deep desire in our hearts to go out and see all these different cultures that are so different from what we know. There's a lot of reasons to want to do this, but mostly it's to see and experience something new. Which makes sense that the second reason I hear most frequently is to have new experiences, to try new things, to meet new people, try new food, maybe even jump off a few cliffs or bungee jumping, skydiving, walk up and touch the Eiffel Tower. We want to try things that are new, and we want to do it somewhere that's fascinating to us because it's so different. In doing that, we gain a better perspective, whether or not we mean to. We begin to see humanity as a global family and not us and them. We have better perspectives on our personal wealth, the privilege it is to even travel in the first place, and to see how other people live. You walk away a better person with a deeper understanding of what life is on planet Earth. By doing that, you become more appreciative. Some people set out to want this, and this is part of why they travel, and for other people, it's a byproduct simply of the act of traveling. You appreciate all the things that helped you gain a better perspective, your income, your family, the things provided to you by your government that maybe aren't provided elsewhere around the world. The fact that you even get to travel in the first place, see the world, and have these experiences. When you come home a more appreciative person, it really helps you to live life a little more fully. And this becomes addictive. And this is how you get travel junkies. People do want to learn more about themselves, and that's a very common thing I hear. Sometimes at home, when you're bogged down by work or family obligations and bills to pay, it can be hard to come up for air. And traveling tends to allow people the freedom away from work, away from the familiarities and comforts of home, to really see what we're made of and to figure out what's important to us, to discover new things we didn't even know were important to us, to be more appreciative and gain all those perspectives. From all of this comes a desire to give back with what we have. Whether it's volunteering overseas, doing something at home, on your own block, in your own community, and everything in between. Once you've seen the world and you've had these experiences and met these people and learn more about yourself and become more appreciative, all of that, you can't help but want to do something with it and give back. It's then important to consider why we photograph while we're taking all of these trips. The main reason I hear from people is we want others to understand what we saw and what we felt. Our families, our friends, our coworkers, they ask how it was, and we just don't have the words, but an image can often suffice. At least it helps. And so we want to take pictures of the places we went, the people we met, the food, the culture, the music, the street scenes, the colors, maybe actual viewpoints. You go somewhere mountainous or tropical. We want other people to understand what we saw and what it meant. And that's the number one reason people take photos. It's to communicate. There's also this desire to go back, to sit down and go through your photos of a trip and remember the great memories and the wonderful experiences that we just had. Images can be timeless that way and take us back to such an important place and time for us. The special memories, even if they're not the most beautiful photos ever taken, maybe it's you and a loved one in front of the Eiffel Tower, in front of Machu Picchu. You want to capture those moments so that you can remember them for the rest of your lives. Share them with friends and kids and more. It helps us to tell a story. This is another reason why photos are so powerful. For the first reason I listed, to help other people understand. Where words fall short, a photo can tell an entire story of a place and a people when done well. And certainly a series of images can tell a very complex story, maybe more so than our words can. When we go abroad to specifically volunteer, photos help people understand these global issues. Talking to people about statistics or government issues or corruption, any of these things can throw people off if they're not really speaking the same language as you. But taking a photo can really move people to action. Powerful imagery can move people to compassion and empathy and action. Which is one of the reasons photography is one of the most effective mediums for sharing a message today. Photo and video, from Instagram to Facebook to Flickr to just emailing photos back and forth. It's unbelievable how much people are now turning to photography to express themselves and share messages, from the simple to the most complex. These are just some of many, many reasons that we bring cameras on trips and why we take pictures in the first place. We can break photos on trips down into two categories at least. I'd say it's straightforward and more complicated. I'm going to list out the straightforward ones and then the complicated ones. And for the rest of this particular talk, we're going to focus just on the complicated photos. What I mean by complicated is there's more to it than just what you would see at the surface. There's things that need to be considered. There's ethics that need to be considered, whereas the straightforward photos are not so much. Let's compare. Landscapes, street scenes, objects like you might find in a market or food, animals if you go on safari or visit zoos, signs just to help you remember where you were, and the classic "we were here" shots, selfies on safari, your husband, your kids in front of a monument, picture of you in front of the Taj Mahal. We were here. This happened. One of those reasons we take photos in the first place, just to capture those special memories. These are all really straightforward. There's not a lot of ethics involved here. People's gut reactions are generally very correct when it comes to these kinds of photos. But complicated photos, on the other hand, need some more forethought. I'm talking about portraits, pictures of children, images that deal with suffering or poverty, patients that you're treating, and general privacy that everyone in the world deserves, children and adults alike. These kinds of photos require some more steps, some more food for thought before you go after them, and even afterthought before you do anything with them. So these are the photos we're going to dig into right now. Let's jump right into the basics of travel photography. These are the things I consider fundamental to bringing a camera out on a trip, especially as it pertains to those complicated images we just listed out. Number one for me is to invest time. People are people everywhere. They're real people, they're living real lives, they have feelings, they have a sense of privacy, they have a need for respect. There's all sorts of things going around there. So as it pertains to people in your images when you are traveling, even at home, invest time. Nothing goes further than time spent with people. This builds relationships, even just a few moments of your time. You can learn names, you can make some small talk or at least gesture. It's easy to share a laugh. Again, you should learn their name, their story, and try to connect. The next thing I'd say is to ask permission. Every photo, every time, ask people permission to take their photo. This is a respect thing. We would do it at home, and there's no reason we shouldn't do it when we're away. Even if you don't speak the language, a gesture to the camera and a smile can go a very long way, and it's just the right thing to do when it comes to photographing people in your images. Allow them space to decline. As a visitor, as a volunteer, you carry more weight than you think, and some people might feel like they owe you a yes. But if you approach them humbly and graciously and allow them to say no, again, that's a really respectful thing to do. And you should respect that decision. So I would say, in my personal opinion, don't try to snap a photo from far away or from waist level if that person has already said they don't want you to take their photo. This is Afia. I met Afia in Tanzania when I was there with the Giving Lens. It's not hard to see from this photo that she looks worn down, maybe even sad, depressed. These are some of the words that come to mind, at least for me. Afia has HIV, and you can tell that she's suffering and she's tired. Permission was given for this photo, but I had no response from Afia herself, and there's a lot of reasons. Like I just listed, she's tired. She'd just come home from school. She's not feeling well today. I'm going to show you an image now from just a few minutes later. You can see in this image, Afia is smiling. Her cousin is there also laughing. Her face has lightened. It's not that she's any less tired. It's not that something magical has occurred in between. This is just an example of investing time, having some patience, making small talk and gesturing, even acting silly, and then being prepared to take the photo when the moment I was hoping for arrives. This, to me, kind of encompasses those basic reasons to ask permission, to invest time, to allow space, to be patient. And I love this photo, so it just goes to show that those steps really do matter and they really do count, especially when you're volunteering, but really anytime you're traveling abroad. Let's continue on. Continuing on with these basics, another important step I'd like to add is to always show them the photo. Don't take for granted the power of an image. A lot of these people that you will meet, and children, depending on where you go, on which country you're in, they may have never seen a camera. They may have a camera phone. It's spreading rapidly around the world, access to cameras. But if you're carrying a nice camera, show them the photo. Even if you're not carrying a nice camera, show them the photo out of respect, but also because you don't know the power of someone taking your photo. It really is a moving moment for a lot of people to see themselves. It affirms that you see something beautiful in them and they want to see what that was. So please avoid and just shoving a camera in someone's face without asking and taking a really quick photo and then running away with it. Ask, get permission, invest time, show them the photo. If it is a child, please show the parents as well. Be aware of what is in your image. This is just part of travel photography in general if you want stronger images, but especially as it pertains to travel photography and to being respectful of people and what you're showing. How much poverty is revealed in your image, if any? Do you want it in there? For example, is there a string of ragged laundry in the background? Do you want that? Is that part of this picture, of the purpose of this image? What if that laundry line has, underwear hanging from it? Is that something you want in your photo? If it's not, do it a different way. If there's any sort of signals of poverty, at least be aware that they're there. You can choose to include them if you feel they play a role. But otherwise, you might embarrass people when they realize that their undergarments are hanging behind them in the photo. Learn to see a little more clearly, a little more keenly as you travel, and it will open up so many more doors and pay so much more respect to the people around you. My bottom line on nudity is to always avoid it unless maybe very, very specific situations warrant it. If you're visiting a tribe where the women are topless and this is part of their culture, sure. And they know you're there and you've asked permission and it's obvious you have a camera and everything's above board, then yes, there are situations where nudity might be fine or appropriate, or it might still be completely respectful. But in general, I would say avoid it, unless you're absolutely certain, and especially with children. That's just not something you ever want to deal with or have concerns about. Starving animals tend to set people off when you come back home. This, for some reason, for a number of reasons, is imagery that really hits home for people. Starving dogs or cats, animals in any way that are injured, all sorts of reasons. Do you want that in your image? Are you aware that they're there? If you're taking photos of it because it's different to you, because you're shocked by it, and that's just your reaction is to take a photo of it because you're going to want to show it to someone and be like, can you believe this is real? You might even be angered and you want to raise awareness. Just be aware that you have these things in your images. I'm not saying that there isn't a circumstance where it might be okay or serve a purpose. What I'm really calling people to is to be aware of what's in their photos. Lastly, addresses and anything that reveals a location out of respect for the people that you're photographing, their homes, their right to privacy. The world is getting smaller every day. My last kind of basic tip is to take note. What are people's names? Where did you meet them? What's their story if you have a translator because you're volunteering? This makes it really more powerful later on. I want to pause here for a minute and talk about stereotypes. A stereotype is a widely shared generalization, usually of a person, a place, or an entire culture. And when I say reinforcing a stereotype, I mean you're buying into or perpetuating this generalization in your word, action, or in documenting it in photos. Stereotypes around the world are always going to exist. We have stereotypical Americans, we have stereotypical Africans, we have stereotypical Asians, Mexicans, Caribbeans. The broader the net you're casting, the closer you are to a stereotype. And we want to be aware of this. So I would say be aware of the story you are telling. You can and will witness some really hard circumstances no matter where you go or what you do to volunteer. Travel is always going to push us right to the edge of our comfort zones or even completely out of it. the story you're experiencing, is there a way to tell it that's not demeaning to the people or not stereotyping these people into one particular box? To name a few, there's the poor African, there's the overpopulated Asia, there's the stubborn Westerner, upset they're not getting their way. There's all sorts of stereotypes, and none of them are helpful. And most of them are untrue. There's white Africans, there's North Americans of every race and nation. There's, highly educated children. There's very undereducated, rich people. There's all sorts of broken stereotypes in the world, and that's because stereotypes generally lack truth. When you're experiencing a story that might be coming close to a stereotype, which does occur when you're dealing with poverty overseas especially, but also at home, try not to fall back on what you had already pictured in your head about these people or about this place, or what people back home are already picturing about these people or about this place. There's a different way to approach it. There's a way to break that stereotype. What if there's joy in the pain? What if there's family in, the agony? If there's support and community and wonderful things happening in spite of circumstances, that breaks a stereotype. So as you're encountering these stories, know that they're not all hopeful, but there is humanity in all of them. And you just have to dig for it and challenge yourself not to fall back on photos you've seen before that reinforce the stereotype, or anything that is even vaguely close to what you thought it might be like. Chances are that's going to be very close to a stereotype as well. So rather than going straight to how different or sad these photos and stories are, how different the culture is, seek out things that are the same, and that will pull in the humanity. Allow me to explain some of the things that are the same no matter where I've been around the whole world. Family, love, support, strength, humor, passion, relationships, desire, heartbreak. These are just a few. There's so many stories that bond us together. And if you can focus in on those shared connections rather than an us and them mentality, the further and further away from a stereotype you'll get. I'm sure you know and would agree with the fact that we're all part of the same story. It's not the end of the world if your knee-jerk reaction is what you've been told your whole life about a place or a people group. But I think we grow and we're better for it when we realize actually we're very, very, very much the same. Let's move on to the Physiotherapist Code of Ethics. The Physiotherapist Code of Ethics is really straightforward. Photos may not be used on social media or presentations without informed consent. Specifically photos of your work, of the project, of the medical mission. But you might want to err on the safe side and just get the go-ahead before sharing any photos from the trip. Photos of religious or cultural events shouldn't be posted without context. That leads to things like stereotyping. When you post a photo of a religious or cultural event, without context, people might say things like weird or gross, and that's demeaning to the people and the place that is in the image of what's going on. So do yourself a favor, learn the context and share the context, and everyone will grow and be better for it. Pretty obvious, but don't edit photos to misrepresent a scene. Don't portray a person or a patient as inept. We're going to go into this a bit more before the end of this session, but we want to be hopeful and empowering and supportive of our patients as we're working overseas. As I covered, don't reinforce stereotypes or fuel prejudice. Let's avoid altogether this stance of us and them. It's all of us. We're a shared human experience. Images should be positive and celebrate diversity. A little more about the role of photography in the physiotherapy world. Sensitivity. You're already sensitive to your patients. You know them well and their bodies. It's an intimate relationship, one of healing and touch. When you're traveling, you can be distracted and overwhelmed by all the emotions, and you want to document it all. And you can forget how the picture will make them feel and really just focus on how it makes you feel. So try to be sensitive as you are physically and in your work, but with your emotions and with your camera, as to how this photo might make your patient feel. Consider if they're disrobed, disheveled, inept. Are they in pain? Are they shy? And if they are, what would the purpose of that photo be? And then ask yourself, is there a way that you could tell this story that's more appropriate? Remember one of our very first rules of asking. Invest your time, because time builds trust. Don't rush it, and be sure to spend time with the patient before inquiring about a photo. Create an atmosphere where your patient has ample space to say no. And if you have access to a translator, use them. Be aware that your patient might feel vulnerable. You, as a volunteer, as a visitor, as a guest to the country, and as a physiotherapist, are actually in quite a position of power. And there's a chance people will feel obliged to let you take a photo of them. So always be gentle, be humble, always ask, and never put pressure on people. When you're dealing with the good stuff, those great photos where children are jumping for joy and mamas are cackling and people are out playing in the streets and the whole atmosphere is just enlightening and uplifting, you still want to do these core basics that we covered. Invest time, ask, show, affirm, avoid stereotypes, seek authentic interactions, be thankful, and take notes. This will ensure that the image is positive for everyone involved. But let's talk about photographing the hard stuff again. All of those steps that apply to photographing the good stuff apply, but there's a few extra steps in there. You really want to emphasize investing time and learning a person's story, where when everything is happy and wonderful and effervescent, it's easy to just snap away and show people the pictures and have a wonderful time. When you're dealing with harder stuff, you need to go slower and be more patient, invest more time, move cautiously, and ensure the photo has a purpose. Let's look at this photo of another family in Africa, specifically in Tanzania, dealing with HIV. We invested time, we learned the story, we were patient. And I knew before I took it, this photo would have purpose. For me, the purpose was to express the isolation the family was feeling from its community because the parents have HIV. And yet to me, this photo is not demeaning. And I'm wondering if you can tell me why. Take a second to have a close look at the photo and see if you can figure out what I did and how I did it. A couple things I want to point out about the choices I made in this photo are that I took it from above to kind of emphasize that sense of vulnerability without actually making them feel vulnerable. Later, I edited it into black and white to add further that sense of isolation. The mama's eyes are downcast, which also adds to this sense that they're being isolated. But that's only by chance. It's not because she was actually upset, or definitely not that she was upset about the photo being taken. This was just a split second that captured the story I was going for, which also applies to the boy, whose eyes are open and looking up. To me, is symbolic and hopeful. I took a number of photos, maybe over the span of 5 minutes, and this one really captured the story I was trying to tell. I did it with keeping the family feeling respected by putting in all the things we already talked about, like time, permission, and patience. Some other ethical issues to consider. Now that we've gone over the basics, we can jump in a little bit further here. Photographing children. Children everywhere deserve to be treated the same. So always look for a parent or an adult to ask or gesture if there is a language barrier, and make sure taking the photo is okay. Children are vulnerable to being taken advantage of, so do treat them with the utmost respect. And do them a favor and show them the photo and praise them, because they've given you a beautiful gift of an image and they deserve tons of affirmation in return. Gifts. To me, the bottom line is to not hand out gifts. Why I say that is because if you don't have enough for every single child or person in the vicinity, you can quite quickly fuel jealousy, theft, fighting, or worse. You definitely don't want to have that on your hands. Handing anything out to children also indirectly tells them that there's opportunities out on the street, maybe begging, rather than being in school. And finally, don't hand out candy. Dental care is limited in many countries around the world. Handing out lollipops, gum, chocolates, and anything like this can really do damage to communities, especially highly touristed ones. Please know this is different from donations to local clinics or schools. Absolutely, if you have means to bring something to the country and leave it behind, you should. But I recommend contacting them first and inquiring as to what they actually need. Then make sure it goes directly to an administrator who can see things are handed out fairly. Paying for photos is a hot topic. Here's my bottom line. If the person in the image is an adult, it's up to you. I'd like to suggest some better options, which are to maybe buy something from them if you're in a marketplace, share something with them if you can purchase 2 sodas or a meal or some street food, anything like that. Anything to create a bond generally will mean you've invested time, as we've gone over now quite a few times, which might mean they'll quickly relinquish that request to be paid for their photo. At the end of the day, it's up to you. If you have a gut feeling that you're really going to regret not taking this photo, maybe because the person is wearing traditional clothing, then go for it. You're an adult and they're an adult. For children, never pay for photos. Same as with money and gifts, it sends an indirect message, or a direct one, that school maybe is a waste of time and you can make money out on the streets. This really perpetuates the cycle of poverty. Let's take a look at this photo that I captured in Cambodia. This woman was not interested in having her photo taken. And I can say fair enough, she's working very hard on a very hot day. I personally was in love with the red and the blue smoke, the rake, and her expression. I found all of it very, very appealing as a photographer. My gut told me not to miss this photo. And so the simple solution was we bought 12 rice cakes for $1. That's a pretty easy solution. And suddenly, she didn't mind the photos. No problem. Go right ahead. So permission was given. She didn't feel like posing per se, but actually that's perfect because this is a real life shot of a market in Cambodia. I still showed her the photo when we were done. We avoided paying for a photo, but there was a respectful exchange that took place. Other ethical issues carrying on, nudity. In general, as I covered, avoid photographing it when you can. You probably can't share the image, at least not socially. It's potentially violating to that person unless as I said, there were maybe very specific situations in which it would be okay. And really never photograph nude children or babies. You can become accustomed to unclothed children when you're traveling abroad, and in a lot of countries it can be very common. But when you pick up your camera, remember, pay attention to what's in the frame. Some hands-on tips just for photography's sake. Don't fire your flash. Learn how to turn it off because it's very accosting to the person and it never looks flattering. Get a camera with low light capabilities. This is also called ISO or high ISO, and it will give you the ability to photograph in low light without a flash. Turn off your GPS settings. This protects the location of your patients. When you're given permission, act quickly. They're not your personal or private models, and do what you can to get the photo in about 3 shots. Maybe 5, 10 would begin to get very excessive, but don't make them wait. If you can't get the shot, you need to call your losses and let them move on because they have jobs, babies, and same as anyone at home, they don't have all day to wait for you to get just the right image. Remember, practice makes perfect, so if you have friends you can practice with before you go traveling, that's even better. When they ask for something in return and your gut says not to miss the photo, try the following. If they have anything to sell, purchase an item. If you have anything to give, such as a pen, you could consider this trade if the photo is really important to you. But always try investing more time and making small talk and trying again. If it's possible, you could purchase something to share. And at the end of the day, just consider the message paying for photo sends to the people. But you do have the right to weigh that against how deeply you feel moved by the potential image at hand. Let's review some key takeaways. People are the same everywhere. Approach them as you would want to be approached. Always ask, always show the photo, invest time, and respect people's wishes. Always try to imagine this is happening in your neighborhood, on your street, to your children, or at your place of work, and how you would feel. Then approach accordingly. I do recognize children can and will come running. Some people will ask for photos, and other situations like this arise that might not arise at home because a camera is a novelty still in many places around the world. Evaluate the ethical situation before grabbing your camera. Look for nudity, vulnerability, lack of consent, underage, and also signs of poverty. If there are ethical dilemmas, consider how you can work around them. Can you move? Can you recompose? Can you evoke a laugh or an emotional reaction from the person? Anything that breaks the stereotype. Consider the story you're telling. Look for everything in the image that might take away from that story, and really try to go after images that tell stories of hope and humanity, whether it's at home or overseas. Remember that there are times when it's best to put the camera down and just have the experience. This can be hard for photo addicts, but definitely there are times when this is true. Know that stereotypes almost never represent the real culture. Before you go, know the stereotypes and be aware of the preconceived notions, and then set out to prove them wrong. Avoid reinforcing these stereotypes once you're home, and instead open people's eyes to the beauty of a culture, even if that might involve some heartbreak, struggle, pain, or poverty. That doesn't mean it's less beautiful or any less human. As a physiotherapist, you may have some authority in people's eyes, so always leave room for people to decline. They might say yes because they feel like they can't say no. Adhere to the CPA Code of Ethics for photography. Always smile, be polite, be sensitive, and be genuine. This will open more doors than you can imagine. I want to thank you for taking the time to listen to me talk about this issue that's really close to my heart. Wherever your adventures take you, I wish you all the best. I wish you moving, wonderful experiences that bring you closer to this idea of a shared humanity around the world. Makes you realize how small and precious and inspiring our world is. If you have questions, I welcome you to email me at kate@thegivingLens.com. I'm happy to elaborate on any points, point you in the right direction before you take your next trip overseas.